Today we are going to make 3 apple pies using completely different techniques and ingredients. Now, there are thousands of apple pie recipes out there, so this is certainly not going to be another recipe video. We are hoping to create sort of a course in creating apple pies. And while the recipes are in the description, I hope that you don't follow them. I hope that you can use what we show you here today as an opportunity to play and experiment and create some of the best apple pies ever. Now, as you will see, I am not a baker. I won't even pretend to be a baker, but I did grow up in Washington State. My great-grandfather was an apple farmer, my granddad, my dad, my mom's side of the family, all apple farmers. So while I may not be a baker, I was born with apple juice running through my veins. And today, I am going to pass on to you what I've been taught. So let's make some apple pies. Now, this first apple pie we are making is my dad's recipe. This is an easy, old-fashioned pie, but a little bit different than what you typically get. To begin, Dad has 2 rules for selecting apples. First, you can use any apple you want as long as it's a golden delicious. Rule number 2, you can break rule number 1 if you want. Just don't use Granny Smith. Dad hates Granny Smith, but you're free to disagree. He's the one with the college degree in apples, so take it up with him. All right, quick note. When you're selecting apples, green is just green. Yellow and dull, too ripe. Starting to turn yellow with a slight translucent skin, perfect. All right, now Dad does 5 things different than most people who make apple pies. First, he slices his apples extremely thin. This creates what I describe as a applesauce pie. You'll see what I mean at the end, but it gives more surface area for the spices to mix in. The second thing is, with more surface area, he nearly doubles the amount of spices he uses. Third, he uses less sugar than most people. Now, this is a trick. Not all apples are the same sweetness. Every variety changes. Even within varieties, they change from year to year depending on weather and all kinds of other conditions. So, mastering apple pie means tasting the apples and knowing how much sugar you need. Now, this takes time to learn, but Dad's rule is that if he screws up, he prefers to make the pie too sour rather than too sweet. And when we get to the end of this, you're going to see why. Okay, the fourth thing is he isn't scared to add some extra lemon juice. Again, if he screws up, make a mistake by adding too much. Skilled cooks know that a little extra acid is better. And again, a little extra sour in this pie will be fine too. The fifth thing he does is uses flour to soak up the water. Now, this isn't all that unusual. That's in a lot of recipes, but there are different techniques to deal with water from apples. The thing about flour is, since we are creating something of an applesauce pie, he isn't trying to get rid of the water, just thicken it and accentuate it. Okay, now about crust. We are going to do 3 different crusts with our 3 different pies today. So both of my grandmothers were incredible bakers. Dad isn't a baker any more than I am, so he always just buys the pre-made crusts. And since this is the easiest version of the 3 pies, we're going to stick to that and show you that you can get away with a pre-made crust and still make a pretty decent pie. Now, the other thing he never does is pre-bake his crusts, and I don't either. And you can, it's probably better, but again, we're shortcutting here. We're focusing on the apples and keeping things easy. Okay, now take a look at this pie. Instead of seeing big chunks of apples, it's cooked together into a texture that personally I love. Everybody has their favorite thing, but I like this applesauce texture. Now, ice cream is the reason why we prefer to keep the pie either lightly sweet or maybe even a little bit on the tart side, because sweet ice cream on top of a sweet pie is just sugar on top of sugar. And, if you like that, great. But what Dad is a master of is contrasting the warm with the cold, contrasting the sweet with the slightly tart. And it is this change, this contrast, that makes his pies interesting, delicious. I believe it's what made apple pie and ice cream such a classic. And I think we've lost something by just dumping more and more sugar in our apple pies. But we're going to see what happens when you add a bunch of sugar and make a super sweet pie in our second pie. This is something closer to what professional bakers would make. Now, the real bakers are already laughing at me, so let's just go ahead and butcher this one right. For this recipe, we are using 3 different types of apples. And another quick note in selecting apples. For apples that are naturally striped, the red colors tell you very little about the apple. Look at the light colors. Again, not too green, not too yellow, just making the transition. Those are your best apples. So the first thing we're going to do here is cut our apples into ridiculously large chunks. And then we're going to put them in a pot, add our sugar and spice, and pre-cook the apples. So we're doing 3 things here. First, we are pre-cooking the apples since they are large chunks. The second thing we're doing is boiling the water out so we don't need to add flour. Now this should intensify the apple flavor. And the third thing we're doing is turning our sugar into caramel, because who doesn't like caramel apples? Okay, now when the water is gone and the sugar is dark, we can pour our apples into our crust. Now, we are putting a link to the pie crust we love in the description. This video is about apples, not dough, so we're going to let the professional bakers talk to you about making great crusts. And here it is. This is our result for pie number 2. Completely different than the first one. Much sweeter, less spice. Good, but I think the real difference is that crust. And while you can make a good pie from a pre-made dough, if you don't mind the work, this buttery crust is so good. It really does make a difference. Now it's time for the third pie in our creation. I started with Dad's pie and made 2 changes. First, I like puff pastry dough. It kind of creates something like maybe an apple turnover pie, an apple turnover apple sauce pie, if you will. But wait to the end and you'll see how this turns out. Second, I cover the crust with dulce de leche. Now, this is not caramel, but it does give you sort of a creamy caramel flavor to the pie. I like it, but the flavor is a bit unique, and I can see why some people might not. I wouldn't recommend experimenting with this one the first time on some important get-together. Make one just for yourself, enjoy it, and if you like it, share it with others. Okay, one other quick note. I used the canned stuff here to make life easy, but the homemade is so much better. We're going to put a link in the description if you want to do it right. And one other note, if I do make it homemade like she does, I like to add Frangelico liqueur to it at the end. It really takes it up another level. Other than that, it's the same apple pie mixture that Dad taught me to use. I do an ugly lattice on the top, egg wash, and this is what it ends up with. Now, the puff pastry does its thing, and if you're a talented artist, you can make this look incredible. It tastes great, but it is a bit chewy. If you like chewy, that's great. If you like the super flaky, tender pie crusts, well, this isn't that. So it depends on what you want to create. And that's really what we wanted to show you in this video, is the different techniques, different ingredients that you can mix and match and make something that is exactly what you want. It is your creation. Oh, and one other quick note. I switched out the plain vanilla ice cream with salted caramel ice cream just to add that additional caramel apple theme. Again, it's all about being creative. We hope you have a lot of fun and create some truly amazing pies this year. Thank you and have a great day.